I'm going to call the meeting
Here.
of,
I was bouncing it off of what we did.
sorry, do you mind if can we start and then let's start, let's call the meeting in order. Okay, I'm calling the meeting to order. This board retreat of the Capitol Summit. Can we please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance?
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty for all.
Okay, so before we get started, just did you guys, who's taking the notes? Did you want to switch it back or?
Wait a minute, I can start this way. You can catch up. It doesn't matter. Good, whatever. I just
Okay.
it'll take me a moment.
Okay, that's fine. We'll take our time. So first of all, Blaze, welcome. I know we've spoken before, but this is significant. This is really the first big meeting with you presiding. And I thank you so much. And Kimberly, nice meeting you. And Dan, you're old school. But what's really exciting about this is that this is super early for us to be seeing this. And I think that's a good reminder to all of us, especially those of us that are newer, because this is, I know this is a huge amount of work to put together all this information. We often didn't see the CIP sheets until November. So, and usually a lot of times it went through the budget committee first. So I recognize this is like, you're just putting a lot of stuff in front of us. And so this is very much the beginning of a long discussion. And so I know that there will be no decisions. We're really just sort of taking all the information in tonight and going from there. And then I imagine the budget committee will sort of take the next step from here. But just wanted to give everyone that a background because this is a new town process. And this is the reason we're here tonight so early. So with that,
No,
early?
We have. Yeah, we have.
oh,
Yeah. Not earlier than that. The reason why we're getting the capital budget is because we're voting on it earlier than we would normally do it. So while hence it is a long process and we're getting it earlier, it's because we don't have as much time on the back end because now we're separated. We're taking them step by step. So I don't know if we actually have less time or more time, but we are voting on the capital before we vote on our.
right, which apparently is how it was done many years ago. Like, I don't know if we're talking like a decade ago or not, but that was my understanding. I know other people have sort of said, this isn't a new process. This is kind of how it was done a while back. Maybe you can opine on that. You just asked me a question though, Ms. Hirsch.
Yes, no, I was unaware that we were voting on this earlier than the operating budget. And, you know, especially for those who may be listening and watching, if you have those dates, it would be very helpful if we're not going to be voting them at the same meeting.
We're voting at the October board meeting
On capital.
on capital. And then the
then-
budget process, November, December will be all on operating.
Interesting. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, which is why it's different. So we don't have more time for capital.
Yes, no, unusual in the years that I've been involved, even before this, that
Yeah.
this is the case. So this must be years and years past.
It was, I mean, I feel like Leslie Moriarty said that this was how she used to do it. So now I realize that that was maybe not, seems long ago to us, but it's within the past 15 years, maybe? I don't know, 10?
Yeah. My understanding is that when the current town administrator was the COO, this was the time frame that they used. That was about 10 years ago. So, and this was the time frame that aligns up with the town, BET RTM's budget process.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, we are. Maybe it sounds great. Okay, so should we turn it over to Blaze or how do you want to manage this?
Yeah, I think they've worked really hard to get, as a team, to get all of this, so it's pretty easy to follow. And Blaze is first going to just talk about the sheets themselves because, we're really trying to coordinate very closely with the town so that it looks a little different. And so it's just good for him to walk us through how the sheets are set up and how they coordinate with this 15-year plan that you're looking at. And Blaze, I think on yours, does he have to hold the button to speak as well?
I'm just gonna triple check that.
There you go. All right. So am I all set?
Yes, sir.
Okay. All right. Thank you, everybody. Excited to be here for my first meeting. Really excited to be with Greenwich Schools. So we've got a lot of information before you today. Capital is my favorite kind of topic to talk about. Before this, before I was with Greenwich Schools, I did a lot of capital budgeting with the town. So excited to be kind of, able to be here and then hopefully help bridge the process too between the two different formats. So at a real high level, what is before you today are two things. It's the these are very first draft documents. We've got the 15-year capital plan. The town is and I'll just speak let me know if I'm speaking too much, but the town, budgets 15-year capital budgets. So what is before you today in this 15-year plan is what we've gone through here as a team is standardize everything that's in the RTM approved budget book. And these are the names that the town puts in Munis, our financial software that we use for all of our budgeting, and that Dan then uses for all accounting for if he's paying for projects. So we standardize all the names, so everything's apples to apples. And then we've got the first draft 15-year plan. This would be, this is your 2024 to 2038. The town only actually appropriates 1 year at a time. So fiscal year 24. The town requires the project sheets for anything that has specifically a fiscal year 24 request. So how we broke up the 15-year plan, and what's before you right now is the exact town format. So we got the template from the town. We've been coordinating with the partners over there. This is what your colleagues on the BET and RTM, when they're talking about projects and capital, this way we've got, we can translate across what we want to look at. We do have, with every project, a way to dive in to all the numbers that are behind, this, and we have to look at different things by school. The project sheets have a 5-year window. And so if you're looking at the project sheet, you've got the standardized name. This is the name that will appear in Munis when we actually go to implement the capital. If it's a start year, end year, we've got a number of ongoing maintenance programs, capital maintenance programs. So you'll see that they say ongoing. These are definitions that are set by the BET: maintenance, replacement, new project, improvement, upgrade. A new project is something that is not on the 15-year plan. So if you're what the BET is looking to know when they set this is someone making a request for something that wasn't on the 15-year plan last year? So were you planning for it, or did this capital kind of come out of nowhere is kind of what the theory would be. That's what they're looking for. Emergencies happen, but then you have to provide usually additional justification when we go through the process. What they've got down here is pretty straightforward: description, statement of need, a couple of other. Our aligning principle this year, they added to align with the POCD, the Plan of Conservation and Development that was adopted by the town. So we're linking up our spending projects with how it attributes to the town's vision for capital investment, Plan of Conservation and Development. This thing right here in fiscal year 23, if you're just wondering what this is, in fiscal year 23, that's in the RTM's approved budget. When was this project shown and for how much was it shown for? So if I'm looking at this one, abatement environmental, we showed in fiscal year 23 that in fiscal year 24, we were planning on asking for $455,000 in fiscal year 24. Then budget decision makers can then look down and see, well, how much have we budgeted, not actually spent? How much have we budgeted for this same thing over the last 3 fiscal years? So in this one, we've budgeted $149,000 for this project over the last 3 fiscal years. And then you can look down and see for the next 5 years, here's our projected spending. We're asking for this year $50,000 in abatement money. This is fed from obviously these back sheets. These are all formulas in Excel that the town set up. This is where you'll see on the sheets, this is where it's all broken down specifically if it requires specifics. We'll talk about each project and why they're broken down this way. If you have questions, these are very much a first draft. We just kind of got these all together. And Dan and Kim have done a ton of work to kind of help us get where we are today. And then this is a new thing that the BET added. And this is another page where they're looking for some photos, potentially if it's a specific project, maybe a damage to a boiler and you have a photo of the boiler, you can show there's a hole in it. Okay, it's got to be funded. And then some other supplemental information. So these pages are not done yet because we don't have photos and stuff, but the rest of the pages are done. On the 15-year plan before you, it's broken out currently. The first group of projects are in a lighter blue, and we've got this on 13 by 19. It's really still not big enough. But we've got before you, this is the first draft. Anything on the first top, the light blue color, is a project that also has a fiscal year 24 request. This is money that we'll be asking the town to appropriate now. The lower projects are things that are on our 15-year plan, but we are not asking for any money for those projects in fiscal year 24. The BET also asked us to do a number of things, which is one, focus on the first 5 years, because there's a lot of heavy capital coming up in the next 5 years. This is not just something they asked the Board of Ed, but they're asking all town entities this year. And then what we've also been asked to do, and what we've spent a lot of time doing over the last week and a half, is ensuring that the capital in the 15-year plan is not double counted. So if a project, like we'll take Old Greenwich, we're going to be proposing to build a new school or in a major renovation. So we also went through to make sure that we weren't saying the year after that we were going to be putting in a boiler, and if that was going to be something that was worked on in the scope of the work for that project. So that way, in the fiscal model for the town, and when the town is going to budget for things like debt service and looking at the overall capital decisions, they're not seeing a new major project and also seeing maintenance for the same project. What's important for us as decision makers for the schools is to make sure that if a major project is deferred or not funded, that maintenance money would then be added back in. You'll notice on the project sheets as we go through, if there was some major funding that is being removed from the financial model that was approved last year, basically, that we are saying that if Old Greenwich, for example, is not funded as shown, we would need to add back in X amount of dollars in fiscal year 24 or in fiscal year X. Yes.
So just as an example, so I understand.
Yep.
So sticking to Old Greenwich. So Old Greenwich, we are looking to fund that school, which is about 24 million.
Yes.
But if I go to a project worksheet, sorry, they're not numbered, so I'm just gonna have to, which is finishing and painting.
Yep.
And we're in there and it has Old Greenwich asking for $7,000 this year for painting. Are we painting in Old Greenwich, or is that a deferred cost because we're going to be renovating that?
Those we would still be requesting. So there's going to be a number of projects that are still going to be routine maintenance projects. And also by the time we actually secure the funding, because we're going to get the funding, but there's still going to be some items where we're going to have to do the maintenance. So there's a couple of HVAC projects for these key schools, painting, routine maintenance that will still be funded. Life safety, we have a number of life safety items and ADA projects. What we're going to do is coordinate funding, especially where it's appropriate, with the building committee and the scope of the project. Although we're showing it, you bring up a really good point that I should talk about in the model. So even though when we're showing certain things being appropriated, we will still have a number of projects where the building's going to be occupied. Things are still going to be being used. By the time a shovel's actually going in the ground, from the moment that we're getting the funding appropriated, could still be a number of years. So when we get the funding up front, there will be a number of items that are going to be essential that we cannot let fail in the building. So a big one we'll see, because we can go through, I figured what we would do is go through project by project and we can kind of go through page by page. Very first draft. There's things that are still changing at this moment. This is a great kind of workshop. We have a couple of key kind of budget, really high level decisions that we need input on, especially in the out years. You'll see I highlighted a number of areas where we have really significant capital that is projected in the budget that was approved by the RTM last year for the schools, where we'll really want to make some key decision points, because as an entity, we've also been asked to really prioritize funding, especially as we start getting into the out years. We want to make sure that we're lining up some of these major projects and major renovations with how we're also spending maintenance money. And it's going to be fiscally kind of responsible, where we may end up looking at shifting some of these projects out because previous maintenance history or major projects that Dan's already done no longer warrant them being where they were originally shown in the budget, as we've actually kind of dived into some of these projects specifically. So that's kind of from a high level, I think, where we're kind of coming from at the moment. And basically that's how we are where we are today. That's what's before you. And also, hopefully, as Dr. Jones mentioned, this will, the project sheets, we're just coming out of the gate with the project sheets instead of having a different format that the town uses and then formatting it back into the format that all the other entities are using to approve the same funding. And hopefully, the naming conventions here that are before you, the projects here that are before you are going to be the same ones that all your colleagues are also using on the other boards, so that you can talk, apples to apples with them about the same number. When they're coming right now, the BET, for example, talks a lot about open capital and the ability to execute. This is for every department, and it's especially something for the public schools. This way, what we've had, a couple of things, if you don't have something like this with these naming conventions, it starts getting a little more difficult to track open capital, because a name for some of the same type of work may actually be some of the same work, but you're having some different names. And when you're going into Munis, you've got a lot of accounts. The BET is doing a review of all your open capital. So when we go there, they're going to be like, well, they're talking about this project. Now we can relate how open capital will relate to the funding that's before us today, hopefully. I don't know if, I don't know how much it'll help, but at least it should help with the conversation. So before we dive in, I don't know if there's any questions.
Well, I just had a quick question, because first of all, thank you for this. I know this is something I think that the town and other town entities have been asking us to do, to become more in line, so we can work better together. So this is great. I know you mentioned that this I didn't know they made paper in this size that went through a printer, but hey, you learn something new every day. I know that you said that this was aligned with the RTM's approved budget book, what's in Munis, and outlays the town's 15-year capital plan. Does this also take into account what's been in our master facility plan? That's also worked in here as well?
Yes.
And it aligns with that. Okay.
Yeah. So what we've done here, basically how the town would like every entity to budget, and we can have this conversation, but basically the fiscal year 23 approved budget is the starting point for everybody. And then every entity goes into their 15-year capital plan for the next fiscal year. Things are reprioritized, different things happen, different conversations happen, but in theory, your funding becomes relatively programmatic. Your major projects kind of all start flowing through. So you start shifting, numbers will change, prices will change, you start getting a better idea, but a lot of the numbers will stay relatively the same and start sliding forward. And then the RTM has something similar that they're going through. The biggest thing that we were kind of, I think, able to do, and what we spent a lot of time on, and Dan, you can chime in, but what's reflected before you today is also will tie back to the KDG report and a lot of the master sheet that Dan uses to actually implement the capital. So when we dive in, we're spending a lot of time coordinating. This is kind of a translation document, really, to take a lot of the stuff that we have in that KDG report in the document that Dan's using to actually implement a lot of these numbers. They're behind what's here today. That's reflected. And that's when we get into these specific project sheets and you actually see the breakdown for the funding request. These numbers have to align with what Dan has on how to actually implement the capital. What is good about this kind of approach, I think, is that capital is also larger than just facilities, although facilities is the largest part of capital. So there are IT projects on here. There are food service projects on here. And eventually there's looking at working with other there's a security vehicles project on here. There's athletics. There's a lot to do with athletics that we can actually start having some conversations about capital investment that might be needed in athletics. Maybe not this year, but in the outer years. So it's merging our facility specific sheet with also thinking about some of the other programmatic capital based approaches that we might want for the district wide, all your IT, all your other stuff.
Thank you. That was
That's the
really-
philosophy.
No, thank you. That was really, I mean, educational, I think, for those of us who've not had the opportunity to look at these type of formatted documents.
Yeah, and if you just got this 91 pages, I mean, this is like a lot of stuff right here. So this is really, there are, it was this quick skim through, and really what is the easier document to look at is going to be the 15-year plan. And this is really how you're going to prioritize things year over year. Yeah,
I was
well,
gonna
we
say-
finally are finding bigger and bigger printers as we go through the building.
Kim, could you share this? That would be great,
Yeah.
just for everyone on the screen. Thank you.
So do we want to go through project by line by line here quickly?
Sure, Ms.
and
Costin,
kinda-
did you have a question?
So my question is, I see things like fences and finishes and, some of them have the location where it's taking place, GHS or, is there any detail in here about where, because I look at the first sheet and I don't see where the work is taking place.
Yeah, as we go through, there's some projects like abatement that doesn't have a specific location. It's related to the size of our capital request, and it's based on Dan's institutional knowledge, knowing that, knowing the state of our buildings, knowing on the locations abatements needed, and the size of the amount of capital work we're doing. We know that with this volume of capital, there's going to be items that are going to need to be abated, but we don't know exactly what that is. So the word district is for something, a district-wide program like that. As we get into some of them, they have specific locations that they'll be at. There's kind of two approaches to programmatic capital too. So what we kind of do there's some specific locations where they're really big projects. I mean, like, $600,000 project on GHS Cellular, that's a specific, you're going to call that out. What a lot of times we typically do in outer year budgeting is you have a program, but then as you start getting closer to the actual allocation and you want the conversation on what's going to specifically be appropriated, you start pulling that out. So like we actually have, HVAC's a good one because there's a lot of money in HVAC all the way out. As we get close, we know we have to replace HVAC. We know we have to upgrade HVAC. As we get closer, though, we break that out and give it its own project sheet because a $2 million project is something that you want to have a specific conversation about when you're going to appropriate the funds. So that's why you'll see things start to kind of break out.
Ms. Downey?
Just want to make sure this document will get posted after the meeting, right?
Yes, that's being shared.
Just because
Yes.
it didn't. Thank you.
Yep, and I think we want to make it very clear to everyone that this is a very draft,
Yeah. No.
very draft document, and we still can kind of have a lot of conversations where we can
100%.
move things around and move numbers around. and
100%, but just for the public.
Yes,
That's
and that's
purely.
why I'm saying that too, because
Put draft in bigger letters.
people are reaching
across
out about the
place, and
project
then you'll be
sheets
happy.
already. Oh, yeah, big old draft document, yeah. Draft. We'll make it as clear as this one. So if that's the theory behind everything that we're looking at, why don't we?
Yeah, let's dig into it. At
Kinda
the same
dig in.
time, if it's like a $5,000 item, maybe we move to the bigger ones.
I
But
think we could I think since the conversation we were kind of looking for today is direction, and on some of the bigger items, we really could use some direction from the board and concept. So the concepts before you today, we're still kind of getting some quotes. We're still trying to finalize some prices. Obviously, when you're doing one of the problems, this is a townwide problem. You have to do capital so early. This money's not going to be appropriated and allowed to be spent until July of next year. So, we're getting prices and things right now. So we're trying to build some of this escalation a little bit into the model with these prices, because we're putting together a capital budget for the town. It's due by November. It's not going to be able to be spent by July. So you try to build in some escalation into the prices. The town's guidance that we received is 20%, is looking at using a 20% contingency. Which we can talk about.
So I just have a quick question
Yep.
on this sheet here. If I were to go, so if we look at abatement, I realized the 50,000 was covered across the whole district, but for example, ADA compliance. Here you have, following the sheets correctly, you have 204,000 allocated to Julian Curtis and then 45,000 to the district. In situations like that, is it possible to break this out further to say where that's being allocated, or are those rough estimates that really?
I think the danger there, Karen, I mean, just jumping in, this is our like totals sheet, and these are the detail that go behind them. Right? Like, so I think you kind of have to have both. Because
Yeah,
otherwise this is going to get too, if we start going to that level of granular detail in this, it's going to be a bear.
you want to keep the granularity to the project sheet. And one of the reasons, and we can kind of walk through it, and we can also, there's a lot of information to digest. So this doesn't nearly have to be, and I'm happy to kind of walk people through also offline, kind of go through project by project. And we can also dive into the document that Dan has. If, you know, we can always meet separately too and kind of see how we translated some of these, and it's easier to break it up school by school a little bit that way. But when we're looking at it, especially with the town entity, really what they're going to budget us for is ADA compliance. So they're allocating the money at $249,000, which is why the project sheet is this way, and lines up with the capital plan. So they're looking at, they want to go through and have the detailed information, but it doesn't necessarily mean that you want to have everything broken up in the 15-year plan that granular, because you want ADA compliance to have some broad, you know, you want the funding to have some broad application to it. You have your constraints when you get the money allocated that are defined by the definition and the intent that's defined here in the broken out way, but you want the overall project to have grouping like this, where there's some flexibility in actual implementation.
Right, just to tag on. So, I mean, I'm going to go back to ADA compliance because I know that's where you were looking. For instance, I know the first, 23, 24, we had funding in here. It shows for Julian Curtis in the district. Then 24, 25, there's, several different schools, and it goes further out. I suppose that when we are looking to get this to vote on for whatever year it is, we'll get actually more detail on what is going to be done in each of those schools. For instance, I'm just looking, for instance, Riverside, you see it at 24, 25, and then 27, 28, right? So I assume we'd want to know.
Oh, why don't we start running through?
Well, I mean, I don't know if necessarily everybody wants to go, 10 years out down here, but I just was curious. I just assumed on any given project, that's what we would do. We would get more granular detail as we go further.
No, I agree. I mean, I have specific questions on the ADA compliance, so I'm good with that. So
yeah, no, I just wanted to ask it as a specific question because I know in the front sheet there were an overview, but it doesn't go into details to where and which and what how.
Yeah. There's two approaches. Most of these numbers have the numbers within the 5-year window have mostly specific projects behind them, which we can dive into. Some of the years as you get out, when you're doing some capital budgeting, when we start looking out like 12 years from now, there's just some pieces that based on institutional knowledge, that based on useful life of your equipment and your schedule of replacement, that you're going to be spending X level of dollars every year on routine maintenance, replacement schedules, and things like that. You may not know though exactly in 2035, I'm going to be spending X dollars on replacing this piece when you're that far out. But the responsible budgeting approach would be to ensure that you're showing money and thinking that far out so that people can start building that into their debt service models. Hello.
okay. All right, good. So speaking with.
So, well, you want to go through line by line? It might be easier to kind of go through.
No, but we want to go project by project,
quickly,
maybe.
Because
Project by project.
these are in order. Yeah. Okay.
Oh, Joseph, there you go. That's for you.
So we're probably good with abatement. are we
I'm
good?
thinking we're good with it. Abatement. Does anyone have questions about abatement off the top of the? Okay, ADA compliance, I think is a big program. So questions on ADA compliance?
Yeah, so I have a question with respect to ADA. So how does this allocation of funds for Julian Curtis true up with the allocation of funds that were provided last year by the BET? I don't remember the exact number off the top of my head, but the BET provided certain funds for ADA, which included, a lift and et cetera. And the description in here provides an elevator lift. So what did we do there, and what with that money that was allocated, and what are we planning on doing with the $204,000, and how is that different?
I'll start and I'll let Dan answer the second part. The first part of that question is there's two parts to the description. The description, ADA compliance is one of the programs that we kind of have as an ongoing program in the district. So the first part talks about the areas that this program seeks to invest in. The fiscal year 24 request is specific to two areas, which is a restroom modification at Julian Curtis, and then creating an accessible egress and access. So it's this specific project isn't related to the vertical transportation. The overall program of ADA compliance is like the first two sentences. This one, we would be investing in restroom modification and changing an egress and access to create a pathway that's fully accessible. The funding that was provided last year is currently open capital at the moment. We just got it on July 1, and there's been no activity at the moment on that project.
I think we are talking about.
You have to turn it on, or you want this one?
Yeah, I'm on. Thank you. The money that was allocated from last year for ADA, there was an asterisk with it, and it was to. It was really to emphasize vertical transportation. And I'm not sure if we were going to go with a building committee or not to get involved with that. That's why there's been no expenditures to that. So the cost of an elevator, depending on where it goes, changes greatly. If it's an interior and we have an empty shaft, it's X amount of dollars. If we have to build an elevator on the outside of the building, we have to create walls. We have to create subterranean space for it. There's a whole other MI process that we have to go through the town. So there'll be additional costs for design services. So that money is pretty much just an elevator. This money, as Blaze said, is some other ADA items that are necessary.
It does bring, as we get through looking at the broader picture of what our capital request is going to be, Julian Curtis is a good one because we've got the funding that we just had appropriated for the elevator, which is a significant project. But we would also want to have a conversation as we get down the line to the expansion renovation request, and where it was shown in the approved budget by the town last year was 24-25. And this would be, I think, a conversation, especially when we get down there. We have this open capital. How do we want to relate that? Are we going to submit this request for Julian Curtis as well? Because if we are, it's going to impact, I think, how we coordinate on the open capital for the existing project. If that makes sense. It's going to be a conversation point that we're going to kind of have to have. And I think if I was on the BET, I would also want to know, well, okay, we allocated this money. Is this something that is still going to go forward? Are you going to coordinate this money? Or is this a project that you would return those funds back to the general fund? And, instead we should go move forward with a, expansion renovation. So this is the kind of conversation that I think we're kind of looking to have.
So, hi, everybody. Sorry, back to school night. So to clarify, so we think that this 249 number plus the number allocated last year That's all, that money altogether is, what we're hoping is can be budgeted towards elevator, accessible bathroom, other ADA stuff of that matter, right? Is that fair to say?
Yeah, yeah, to all, like, this request right here, 249,000, 204,000 of that is specifically primarily to creating an accessible bathroom and then an entrance and egress way that's currently not accessible. And that is a project, if you do see it like that, that we went through and identified, even with the request of the school funding, this is a project that would proceed anyways and would be coordinated. You know, Dan would have this bathroom done. And when the engineers and we have the building committee talking about, okay, what are we going to be doing? We got 24x or 29.7 million. This is something that we would be saying we have to do this ADA bathroom. And it's already something that we know would be done anyways, even with the building project that's shown.
And to clarify, and we are forming a building committee. That's what I thought. Okay.
For the elevator project.
Right.
Yes,
Yes,
that is a
it's-
building committee project.
But just to be
The
clear,
ADA
so the 204,000, Julian Curse, that is one bathroom. Is that correct, Dan? Or it's one per floor, just to understand, and the egress in one.
To be
particular-
determined.
Okay, as many bathrooms as we can get for
And if it's a-
200,000.
If it's a gang bathroom, obviously it costs more
Okay.
than a single bathroom.
Okay, thank you.
But this is also a good example of where I see in the detail that you've laid out after you describe the items related to Julian Curtis, that if major projects for Old Greenwich were not to be funded, then you'd have to bring these back into the
Yes,
play. So this is a
talking
perfect
about the
example.
Programmatic capital and the requested approach from the town, don't double count. If you're gonna, in our model, this is what we're doing, is trying to thin out. So we removed $875,000 in 26. That was actually in the RTM, approved budget here. We've actually removed 875 and 128 in those 2 years because of the major project. But if you weren't going to do the major project, there's, serious ADA concerns that you would want addressed and show that you're going to, as you all know, it's important for the ADA piece of it is
Yeah.
showing a plan to address. And that's one of the things that the DOJ looks for.
The other building, we had talked about a project at Western. Did that get completed just because it's not referenced anywhere? So, so just to give us an update.
We actually have a request into the first selectman for a building committee also for Western. And I don't know where they are in the process. I think they're probably interviewing right now because I haven't had an update on that. But because it does involve some of the outside, we're going to need an MI, and under those new rules last year, we had to request a building committee. So Dan, you can update if you
Can we
like.
request a waiver of a building? I mean, I gotta say, because there comes a point, right, with a project that a building committee doesn't always make sense. And if we're just talking about that we have the funds appropriated for Western, and we know the work that needs to be done, it seems to me.
Yeah, I do.
A conversation with the first selectman's office might be worthwhile to waive the requirement.
Well, we
No, no.
actually, we did, and the first selectman's office reached out because it's like, wow, here's another building committee. And I said, as a reminder, the first selectman has the opportunity to actually waive the building committee if he should so choose. And that way we would be absolutely fine with that on this project. But to date, I haven't heard that he's waiving it.
On that topic of building committees, is there an opportunity for us to request to waive a building committee if Dan feels that one is not necessary? Do we have a procedure in place in order to do that? If not, we certainly should talk about that at one point going forward.
All right. Do we want to talk about athletics requests? Move on.
Can we talk about the track? So this is not to make it, I guess the question is, I know we talked back and forth over time, and I guess, again, this is a discussion. This is not to do a regulation track. This is purely to resurface the track, which I know came up last year. Do we have any sense that if we did want to do a regulation track, I know it's a much bigger project. Do we have any sense of how many multiples the cost would be, the time, or is there no appetite for that? I know it's kind of been bantered about off and on.
I think it's a much larger conversation. By adding lanes, you're pushing bleachers back. You would be changing possible projects that are already in the wings. We'd be changing probably the drainage system around the current field. We would probably be adding more synthetic turf. It might be an item that we want to look at, my own opinion, look at when we are resurfacing the field. I mean, adding 2 more lanes to a track, it's attractive to the school being able to host senior events and championship events. It was discussed, but it kind of died on the vine. So the money that we're seeing here now is just to resurface it to be able to get a few more years out of the existing 6-lane.
Do we know how many years, like a resurfacing, what is the lifespan of a resurfaced? Like how often is it? 5 years, 10 years? Do you have any sense?
I don't have an exact date.
Okay.
I'm just going to say 5 years.
Okay, thank you.
Well, Christine, I have a little information on that, if that's
Thank
helpful.
you.
My pleasure. We we priced it out, didn't we, Dan? And we had the architect give us a number. It's a very big number, too big to really kind of consider in real time. We did start talking to groups about outside money, some organizations that might want to dedicate something to a former coach. And it's still in the works. It didn't fall apart totally. So we're still talking about raising money privately to create a public-private partnership in order to move forward on that. So it's not dead. We're still talking about it. But we did price it out. It is kind of expensive.
At a higher level too, athletics is a good one where as we're looking at building out programmatic capital over the years, we know there's a number of areas. There's also my former hat from Parks and Recreation. There is, I think, some coordination on this program that, we really could benefit from being, from the public school side on the, drain it where, and I think it'll be a good conversation to have when we get into the budget time with the budget committee on where really should drainage, for example, of athletic fields be budgeted. The program is kind of being implemented. For example, last year, Parks and Recreation, I know, included some money that included some schools for the drainage program at fields. And we want to make sure that we're not double counting capital in the capital model and something that Parks and Recreation would take care of. And we also have things like court replacements, tennis court replacements, basketball court replacements, not just the resurfacing that Parks and Recreation does, but actually going in and, rebuilding a court that's 30 years old and cracking all the time. These are some things that we want to make sure we have on the radar. But we're also coordinating with the Parks and Recreation budget because Parks and Recreation has a program that they recently put in for rebuilding courts, for example, every 5 years. So there's really no courts. There's very few courts in town that are less than probably 30 years old. So the maintenance is one piece, but it'll be looking at that. But we want to make sure we coordinate on where that should be budgeted and get some direction from the BET. So that's something that I kind of look forward to reaching out to them about because we don't want to double count.
Just so I understand, so to resurface it, it would cost approximately 440,000, but that doesn't include this additional 10. So you're only asking for 440 versus 450. And if we don't approve the 440, you're saying that we need $10,000 a year for every year going after.
That is a $450,000 request. That would be an error on the sheet. So that's one of those examples where, draft comes in, but the goal there is what Dan and I and Kim were really talking about, and Dr. Jones is reaching out, and that district money is something that's just like your basic upgrade. Has nothing to do with the track. That's just your kind of basic maintenance of some of the equipment, some of the athletics infrastructure.
The other fields or the other courts. And
the courts or athletics building where they put all their equipment in, things like this. And we really, that's where we want to coordinate on some of those out year money to make sure that you'll actually see that on your project sheet. I was looking at, so I think we submitted these on Monday. So on the project, on the capital plan, you'll see in 27, actually looking at pushing that up to like 50,000. Because $10,000 is nothing. I mean, it's really not a realistic number for doing any work. It's really a maintenance money in an operating budget. So what it would be ideal to kind of eventually instead of looking at these $10,000 pieces, these are kind of placeholders for just stuff we know comes up, but it would, Parks and Recreation hired a consultant, and we'd like to kind of maybe leverage some of their work, because I think they studied a number of our courts as well on like a maintenance long-term plan. And we really want to reflect some of that for the decision makers in budget, so that those are in the out years. Those are really placeholder things at the moment.
So just out of curiosity, in your description here, statement of need, it says the track has exceeded its useful life and should be replaced, not just resurfaced. Yet the request is not for a full replacement. It really is just for resurfacing. So, I know how many people use that track. It's not just our athletes and our not just our track team. It's used by every athlete in the school. It's used by many of our community neighbors. And when you have a track that's past its useful life, it can cause a lot of damage to people's knees, ankles, and other parts. So I was just curious what led us to decide to just resurface it, and will that actually make, it just was an odd thing when it says it's exceeded its useful life, but we're only going to resurface it. So I'm just curious what the reasoning was for that.
I think
Dan?
that was me just editorializing. Let's be straight about it. The track isn't dangerous. There was a large divot that I want to say happened naturally. Somebody thought there was something sinking underneath it, but so we had that replaced in, I think it was April or May. So it is fine. It's like if you have a carpet, the carpet still looks good in your house, but it needs to be replaced. I come from a track family. My kid is currently on a Division I scholarship for track. So I kind of look at things differently than a lot of people. The track is in good shape. Is it great? No. Do we want to have it 8 lanes? That'd be great. One of the reasons we didn't go for the full replacement was because the Cardinal Stadium Phase 2 kind of played into it. Had we gone forward with Phase 2, and if we go forward with Phase 2, we really have to look at the placement of the track. And if you think about it, the current location of the track, if we had to extend it outwards towards the visitor side of the field, the actual shape changes. So we would have to add, like I said, additional, we may encroach on the football, soccer, lacrosse field. We may have to make changes to that. So there was some thought about waiting until that carpet needed to be replaced. We can certainly look at it again as we get more information about what else is happening with Cardinal Stadium.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure the cost is significantly higher, but I, much like you, have a
Significant.
triathlete in my family, and so I'm pretty aware of how this takes toll on one's body, but that's why I asked. So thanks.
And now the wording is still in the process of being adjusted on some of the.
So then I might suggest if it is, I don't want anybody to be concerned that it's exceeded its useful life and that it's not safe for our athletes and our community members to use. So maybe we just want to rethink that the way that is, because as long as it's resurfaced and it means it's still safe, then
we're extending the
that's good.
useful life, really, and
Perfect.
it should be reflected in the wording. Yeah.
Thank you.
And I know that there's a couple of people that have time constraints, so I figure we'll keep going through project by project, and then let me know if you want to switch to some of the much larger, because some of these, I don't want to spend time talking about like $10,000 when there's like
Right,
30,
and I
40
expect you'll
million.
be taking this to the budget committee next anyway, Ms. Downey, right? We're a little bit more
We haven't
time.
gone that far.
Okay. So BOE, disaster recovery.
Can I just ask a question? So can we talk this versus the redundant server? What is the difference with this, the redundant circuit builds, which looks like from the chart that we're now going to have every school is linked to 2 other locations? I don't know, maybe it needs to be a Mike Ting discussion to understand the difference between this and the server room.
Are you talking about the server room in the basement?
Well, there's the server room, and then we're asking for, we're talking about $915,000 for the redundant circuit builds.
Yeah, this would
So,
be.
the other stuff's all small stuff. That's just the big number I was focusing on.
Yeah, so we did meet with, this project was submitted by Mike Ting. And so last year there was a request to relocate the server room in the basement. That's a critical item. It was reduced, and, basically defunded. Mike has been working, and he'll speak much better than I can on this, but he's been working with some BET representatives on a kind of new approach to thinking about IT and disaster recovery. And instead of prioritizing the server room, which you'll see is still on here, but now pushed a few years out, and if I don't know if you've seen his map basically, but essentially right now, everything, that big dollar amount is like everything right now runs on arrows, like coming all back to the server room. So this is, instead of having to relocate the server room, this basically designs a network that's more like the towns that runs on circles. So you're not dependent on everything coming back to this building and having one server room. He's got a graphic that is not this graphic in here. That's actually a really nice map that shows all our locations, and they're all feeding back into here. And then he flips it and shows, circles going around to all of our locations. That's how the town's network actually operates. That way you're not dependent on just one place that can take down your entire network. It's running around in circles, basically, would be my non-IT way to describe that. That's what the big bulk of it is. My understanding is BET reps have been working closely with him to try to, design a program that, might be appropriate and also mirror some of the town's practices on IT disaster recovery.
Thank you.
Is it just, again, I don't have questions on every subject, I
No, hey.
promise. But so the only question I had with this is, assume this is offsite here. Do we already have a facility that you guys are considering for this? Like, I just noticed here, for instance, like some of the costs for things like HVAC. Like, I didn't know if it was a facility that we were looking at that may already have a lot of this built in, or we're just looking to upgrade what's there in order to make it doable for this.
I can't answer this specifically.
I don't need a specific
Yeah.
location.
But no, basically it fundamentally, oh yeah, Mike, you there?
Yeah, hi.
There we go.
Hi, it's Michael Ting. I can answer that question. So we've identified the disaster recovery site, and we think that Greenwich High School would be the ideal location for it, because they do have a proper server room at the high school with good electrical, proper HVAC, and that is also the site of our redundant internet connection.
Mike, you're the man. Thank you. Any other questions for Mike while he's on about BOE disaster recovery? Okay. So Central Middle School expansion renovation. We got to change it.
Is this the right number based upon the square footage that we put in? And I'm also wondering if it's missing pieces to this that need to be added, right? Because if we're saying, even if we say the 69 million is the right price for the building, which based upon the square footage and the numbers that was throwing around, I think it's off by at least 5 million. But then you have the furniture ad for the following year of 5 million. Okay. But this also doesn't include, or correct me if I'm wrong, demolition of the current building and its removal, or fields, putting the new fields in, and because that sits on swampland, and we are going to need the additional component of the right drainage systems for that. And also how we're going, and then traffic, because I would imagine when you're moving that building around, you're going to have your in and out traffic areas are going to be adjusted, and none of that is here.
I agree with you 100%, Karen. I think because this is kind of a plug number, right? We're plugging a number. I think we want to plug a number that's sufficient to cover the costs. Now, there's a funky timing element to it because of the state reimbursement process. So it's a little perverse because we have to ask for it and the RTM and the BET have to appropriate it if we meet this June 30 deadline, but then the funds aren't going to be touched for a year while we're waiting for the state process. So it's kind of like this weird, which is why I guess you guys did furniture a year out, figuring there was no way we need the furniture appropriation. Like that's a year behind. So maybe the second number, the paving and maybe that we should increase that, furniture, paving, fields, as opposed to the square footage, right? Then maybe that's a way to do it. So that it also spaces out the expenditure, although then I don't know if it makes it ineligible for state reimbursement. I don't know if those pieces are part. No, I don't know. And I think I think this is a discussion. I don't think we're going to resolve it tonight, but I think these are questions that I think maybe the building committee maybe Laura can tell us.
Well, so because we don't yet know where the building can be sited, we don't know a lot. And until we really know where the soil can support the weight of a building, we don't know what we'll need for field refurbishment. We don't, I mean, the challenge with the topography of the site, if you ask me, I mean, there's a lot of rock. I mean, there's giant outcroppings right in the front of the school. So there's a lot of questions that have to be answered as far as, where the building can be sited. And we have RFPs out for an architect and an owner's rep. And we will know more, hopefully within, I would say, weeks about where the building can be and what the challenges of the actual site are with a building currently on the site that we are going to be utilizing.
Yeah, I'm just worried that even the number for the building itself is too low based upon the numbers we were tossing around in the square footage. So I just think that we need to be honest and transparent about that number, because otherwise we're going to be coming and asking for more money.
Well, we also have to have a bigger number back to when we go to the state. The number we ask for that goes to the BET and the RTM is the number that's used for the state funding. So we can't start monkeying around with it after the fact anyway. So I think for better, for worse, we're doing this so early. And I guess we'll vote on it and have some conversations with people about what's the right placeholder number while we're getting some clarity.
Yeah, I think the
And
vision.
sorry,
Go ahead.
also landscaping is going to be a huge part of this project, because we do have neighbors, virtually on every side. So I think there's going to need to be a significant landscaping number.
Well, just a quickie, you got this 5 million following it next year. Dan, just give me, no, certainly not holding you to it, but you got to figure 3-4 years, build this thing.
I think the intent was 30 months.
I think it was less than that. Yeah, the timeline has it at less.
Okay.
Has it at 2 years?
George, the industry's starting to bounce back a little bit. Steel is starting to get more readily available. So we got to see what happens. Glass is a big issue right now.
But some of these other costs are not reflected in the document, right? In subsequent years, right? As far as demolition and landscaping, none of that's in the subsequent years, 26, 27, 28. So that's not reflected here yet.
Yeah, I think at the moment, the program that's before you is the one that we basically took out of the existing budget book that was approved last year, because we know kind of all the key stakeholders are gonna.
And ballpark state reimbursements probably now about 7-8%, we think.
Oh, you mean all in on, because of the sizing? Yeah, we're gonna, well, it was only 10 to start. So we're definitely under 10. Maybe Kathleen, she does the math really quickly. That stuff. I guess the building committee can figure that out. Yeah.
Well, just like Karen said, as long as we're clear on here that that's somewhere in the description, that this is not the full final cost, only in the fact that we do want to be transparent. We don't want to have others in town, who are helping us fund suggest that we're, trying to underprice things or whatever it is. We want to make sure that they know that this is only a partial.
Yeah, it's a good one that we should, this is almost a project sheet that we really could get input in from the building committee.
Yeah.
We meet every
Let's donate it
Tuesday
back to
at
the
8
building
a.m.
Building committee.
All right, let's go.
Okay, equipment. People may have questions, but we'll just keep moving. Exterior concrete masonry.
Oh, I had one question.
Well,
Because you have Old Greenwich in here as an allocation, and is this one of those ones, it doesn't say to take it out if we're doing the major project? Because just in the description for the first year, yeah.
If it's on the second sheet, then it's money that we are including in, yeah.
Yeah, no.
There was actually,
Oh,
right, will be coordinated with the
Okay.
proposed renovation.
Thank you.
Some of the sheets, I will, we're already also, since Monday, I've probably caught a couple of other areas where we were double counting since we've gone through. So
Mhm.
the number that's actually on the 15-year plan would be the number. I think these ones actually all line up, but there's a couple of other sheets I'm sure that had some double counting in them that have since been thinned out. Yeah, that's what we're going down from here. Yeah.
Okay.
Dan might tell you something different, but okay. Fences is another program that I think we're looking at expanding a little bit. It's pretty of a straightforward program.
Equipment.
You have for 23, 24, you have 102,000 for Old Greenwich.
That's what I
Is
did.
that impacted at all by whether or not the building, the funding goes forward to approve?
That's what I just know.
Oh, sorry.
I just asked that. That's okay.
If you look at the last sentence of the statement in need, it specifically says, if we go forward with this for Old G, that would be removed.
This is funding that would be coordinated. We would be asking for it anyways. That's where I was saying for the most part, if it's on the second sheet, not on, it will be a request versus being taken out because the second sheet's an appropriation. Fences, pretty straightforward. Finishes flooring. And just for, this will be one where it's nice to have it standardized because this is something that has been lost in translation and in various books. It's been finishes and flooring, flooring and painting. So now we can kind of have a standardized program for everybody. Painting.
And I think this is not necessarily for painting, but just from a practical response. You have almost every school in here, and then you have an additional allocation for the district. Why is that?
You got to talk to the microphone.
In case we need additional money, for instance, if we go to Eastern Middle School and we find that we need to spend $25,000, it's like a contingency plan. And also, if you look in here, Havemeyer is not listed. We kind of use Havemeyer district as the same thing. So that when you see district, you can assume Havemeyer. When you see Havemeyer, you can assume district. It's just we really didn't have enough spaces for all the schools.
I was going to say, actually, what saved us on the central middle school fix was the fact that we had extra money in the masonry for the district. I remember that was like 500,000 and you were able, that's why we were able to do the fix so quickly. So it is a very wise way to budget when you think about it, to have sort of this contingency built in overall.
Yeah, it's kind of part of your overall maintenance philosophy that you want to have some money that you're going to be spending every year, but you don't want to have it tied down so that you can't spend it anywhere else other than that one location. The pictures don't match that one, so just forget about that. Furnishings and program space equipment.
So my question here is, why is Julian Curtis the only school that you're budgeting $1 million for based on the North Miami model? Are the other schools already in the North Miami model, or we're not doing them? How did we choose Julian Curtis?
So there's two pieces to this. This is a very, very draft program. This is kind of, I think, a new program that we're still working on. So the 3 million is a program to start going school by school. The 1 million specifically for Julian Curtis, I might defer to you, Dan, or is this more of Dr. Jones' question?
It's really because we're still really trying to figure out JC as we have this larger discussion. Like right now, we're piecemealing things, and you don't want to have a building that's being basically renovated and then you've got furniture that's 25 years old, kind of falling apart. And we really are trying to make sure that we're working piece by piece within that building. And in here somewhere, I think it may be in the larger project where we were even talking about like North Miamis now, because of what happened there, they have all the new sinks in the classrooms were upgraded as part of that. So we're trying to take care of the building while we're in there.
Yes, I think it's one too that you brought up a good point that just reminded me that we're still coordinating on as we get through this as a board, what the request is going to look like for like JC. And that's going to impact some of these other project sheets.
So the 3 million in subsequent years, does that mean, is that the North Miamis model going to different elementary schools around town? Is that what that is? Or is that 3 million each year for JC or?
This is still very early on. So one thing we've really noticed is that furniture continually has been cut out of our budget. And we're trying to make sure that we have furniture that's school approved, that is up to date, which is hard in itself as we look across the whole district. So right now, for instance, at elementary, we're looking at what did we actually do when we opened New Lebanon? What type of 21st century furniture did we put in that building? And then we're looking at, okay, what can we afford to do that would help every first grade classroom have kind of equity around the district? The other thing we're dealing with is during COVID, we actually had to throw out, I think, some older furniture that literally, husbands and people had made for their spouses, and that no longer meets our standard. And so we also have a lot of old traditional desks that granted were new during COVID, but they don't really meet the standard of what we want for the classroom, for collaboration, for all of those components. So we're looking across, are we going to start with all 5th grade classrooms, all 4th grade classrooms? Probably the building that's in the best shape is the high school. Back in, I want to say 1819, we invested around $500,000. And I was over there this week and it was like 1819, 2018. No. FY 2019. But they do still have a few areas of the building where they have the old desk. So right now we're trying to figure out what is the best solution moving forward and what that's going to look like. So by the time this comes back to you, it'll be well defined what the furniture plan is going to be.
GHS Cellular improvement. This is another IT project.
Can we just talk about this? Because we talked about it last year. We requested it. It was denied. I mean, it seems to me, I guess maybe in retrospect, we should have added this to safety and security for our interim, but I guess we didn't. How do we, like, the need has been expressed repeatedly by the high school. Tony, I don't know, or if Mike wants to talk to it, how we're going to convince the financing boards if we need this at the high school.
I mean, have them go visit the high school and let them try to use their cell phone and to call out to family.
I think it is, when we talk about it, it's been a big request from PTA because, a lot of our GHS PTA parents obviously have kids that are on that campus, late into the evenings. I mean, somebody emailed, I think, the full board in the last week talking about getting back at midnight and it being dark. And if, a parent, something has happened and they want to be able to call home, it is a safety issue. And if Mike, if you're online, if you want to add anything to that, please feel free. But we feel like it's really important for that campus in this day and age.
Yeah, I'd just like to say the GHS Cellular Improvement Project, I mean, this is the same project which was put forth last year and deferred to this year. Now, as a refresher, this project provides provider agnostic mobile phone service to the entire interior of the high school. Now, whether that be Verizon, AT&T, Sprint, etc. Now, in my opinion, this project is needed because the high school has poor to non-existent mobile phone service. And mobile users rely solely on the high school Wi-Fi for service. Even so, even though our Wi-Fi is there and it's great, this is not ideal. I myself have been at the high school and not received my text messages until 6 p.m. at night. Text messages which were sent that afternoon. Besides the inconvenience, this is also, like Tony said, a safety issue, because if the Wi-Fi went down, no one's mobile phone would work, which if you pair this with an emergency situation, could become very bad very quickly. This project would mitigate a lot of that safety risk.
Can I just ask a question? Because I think it was $1 million last year, and now we have it broken down into 600,000 one year and 400,000 the next. Can anybody speak to just explain, is it a different project, or how is it, why does the cost lay out differently?
Same project, but in an effort to, the project was deferred, and basically trying to smooth capital out. The realistic time by the money would actually be spent. This is better aligned with how it would actually be spent. And we checked with purchasing to make sure that we could phase the project. And basically this way, you're not actually having to appropriate the funds until they're realistically going to be spent. So it's aligned this way. And we looked with purchasing to make sure that this would be something we could do. But the effort there is to smooth out the request where we can.
Thank you.
But as we talk more broadly, and if we cut something somewhere else, we could in theory sort of make this $1 million again and just get this project done appropriately.
In theory, yep.
Okay.
Kitchen renovation, GHS kitchen renovation. So this is an example of something that has its own project sheet. It's a very, it's a significant request. It's a visible topic. So it's not something that's like tucked into food service kitchen equipment. The number is right now a placeholder. It's an institutional best guess at the moment. Any questions on that one? Okay. Hamilton Avenue parking garage and deck. Is that supposed to be there? Did I jump?
You jumped over gyms, Renovate Gymnasium.
And
It's eliminated. It's down below in the chart. That's why.
Yep.
Where it is in the chart versus where the
change the
sheet
name.
is.
That's another draft example. Okay, so project sheet will say renovate gymnasiums.
Mhm.
Little typo right there. A little gymnasium. Okay. These aren't lining up exactly. We got Hamilton Avenue HVAC replacement. These are.
All right, can I just, I thought that was included, wait, could you just, Tony or Dan, refresh us? The BET, didn't we get some HVAC from the town ARP money for a couple of schools? I've kind of lost track. It has been a while, but I thought we had a chunk of them. Was this one of them?
We got money, and a lot of it is going towards the bipolar needlepoint ionization. This is a replacement of the system itself, this geothermal wells that we've all come to know and love over the last few weeks. We can go on, we can have a further discussion about that offline if you like, but this is what this project's about.
Okay.
This would be one of those that I think would be a good conversation project. It's a pretty significant request,
Yeah, I have to editorialize about this for a second. So it says on the project sheet, the existing HVAC systems at Hamilton Avenue were installed as part of a major renovation in the early 2000s, were considered state of the art at the time. Unfortunately, the system has proved to be difficult to maintain and never functions the capacity and level process. To date, we have spent thousands of dollars on attempts to get the system to function at an acceptable level. I was actually really surprised to read that, because as everyone knows on the board, we spent a lot of time talking about the geothermal wells over the last 5 months because of the Carnival We even entertained an engineering study a month ago to see if the fields would be, if it would be appropriate to put carnival equipment on to support the geothermal wells. There is some kind of systemic challenge here that we had that conversation over the last 4 months, and at no point was it shared with the board that actually the geothermal wells don't work and we're going to propose replacing them. That really would have been helpful to know. We got more emails about the church carnival this summer than anything else. Project Veritas, everything else. This was a big concern in the community. And I really think that this was an area where we needed to know that information. Now suddenly we're talking about the didn't work at all.
I'm just gonna, I'll chime in a little bit. I think part of that is that this is brand new for us too. Is the board even, and the town, even willing to entertain the thought? Having a carnival on the geothermal, totally different issue in that if there's damage to the wells, we would have nothing in the building. So that's a totally separate issue. But we would entertain from the staff perspective, and Dan, you can probably speak to it better than I can, but just, okay, let's go and put a brand new system in that mirrors closer to one of our other buildings. Would it be better? We think probably so. But that's why we're bringing it to you tonight.
If I may, I got to take a little heat on that one. Sorry, I didn't include you in that. I've known about this geothermal inadequacy for some time now, years. We couldn't go deep enough. There was not put together, predates Dan. So there's a lot of issues about it. I guess this is to address what has not been operating in the most efficient way, and putting a system in that's going to be efficient. And I believe that's what we're talking about here, isn't it, Dan? That's correct. Yeah. So though I did have knowledge of this, I'll take a little heat away, not sharing it with you. I didn't hold it back. I just didn't have the opportunity to have the discussion. And but it's common knowledge that there is a problem with our system.
Well, I was going to say, just as an aside, this isn't saying that the geothermal wells don't work. It just say they're not working at an acceptable or like the level that we had expected. You know, they were put in 20 years ago. So, you know, it does happen that there's some deterioration, but I definitely would say, since we've brought this forward, you know, this is, I guess, for a best discussion as to what the most economical and effective way for us to handle the HVAC in this building would be, whether it's that or looking to go to the traditional route.
When I say it's a little bit like my air conditioning cooling units, they're not always perfectly efficient. I'm not saying I'm going to fully replace them, but I do put coolant in every year to get them sort of back up to speed. So I'd say that's probably more the analogy here, Michael Joseph, and I'll pass it over to Dan to sort of expand on that.
So the system, like it's stated here, it was state of the art, without a doubt. I don't have a full history on it. I was able to look back at some of the maintenance that's been done over the last 10 years or so, and it's a ridiculous amount of money that's been spent. The whole system is based on using the earth as a preliminary cooling and heating for the school. Is the earth going to provide temperatures in the room of 70 degrees? No, but it's going to get you, up to, it'll get you a start where the rest of the system will kick in and cool. Same with the heating. We're at a point now where the system is very difficult to operate. And we're relying on, for instance, the heating system in there was supposed to be secondary. The two boilers that are in there were sized to be secondary boilers, meaning we would use the earth to heat the building to a certain temperature. It's not doing that. We're getting temperatures from the ground much lower than we had anticipated in the winter and a lot higher in the summer. So it's it works kind of. And it's a great theory. It is. And if you got state-of-the-art materials, state-of-the-art equipment, you had the right people installing it. And more than that, you had the right people operating it. We were relying on the staff in the building to really manipulate and operate a very technologically advanced system. And we didn't do a good job. And we would like to, with this request, go to a more robust system something that's more in line with what we have in the rest of the facility, maybe a cooling tower or something like that, we would want it to be efficient. We're not just going to go in and put in garbage. We have a responsibility to be sustainable and use modern technology to a point. So I think it's a really good idea to move forward now. And the fact that it comes after this latest issue, I don't want to say coincidence, but it really brought things to a head for us to look closer at.
They can be awesome systems. I do know most people that are building, again, homes now are, this is sort of a precursor. Yeah. At a certain point. Yeah. Exactly. And vertical versus horizontal systems, there's a lot to learn, but it's intriguing. It really is.
So are we moving away from geothermal?
Yes.
Oh, okay. Just wanted to be clear.
And so the system that you're proposing would be more like we've talked about it on the high school entryway. We have a little more of a standardization of what systems we use throughout buildings. So if custodians move from building to building, they know how to operate, et cetera, et cetera. And this would bring it in line. So this would bring it in line more consistently with our other buildings.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Do you think we can get St. Rock's to pay for it?
This is one of those ones where you will notice it's checked off a new project. So that would be just for your colleagues on other boards that will pay attention to that. Okay, Hamilton Avenue, parking garage and deck.
Can I just ask, we don't have any imminent safety issues with this. It's just that it's because you read this and it sounds a little worse than I would like it to read.
All right, there's probably a little bit of editorializing in here. It depends on what time of day I was writing this. So the building itself, it's not going to fall. It does have some issues. There are some cracks in it that allows water to get into the substrate, and it's causing some issues. But this is just to do an assessment, and if you look at how we priced it.
Right.
And it's just good standard procedure to have buildings and facilities assessed.
So it's $200,000 just to assess. Oh, I'm sorry. It's $150,000 to assess and then $50,000 for preliminary repairs. And then I don't think the description said it, but the $350,000 for the following year and the 1.5 million would be for what?
Construction documents and construction.
So
It's on page 2.
Yeah, because it says assessment and report 75. Then if it says what we need to do, then it's a preliminary design document 75. And then preliminary repairs would be 50. That's that first year. Then construction documents would be the year after, and actual construction, if it's needed, I guess, is 25, 26. That would be the 1.5 and 25, 26.
So we know we need that, you're saying is.
We need the assessment for sure. And from that, those numbers could either go up or down. I don't imagine construction documents will change, but certainly the construction costs could go up or down.
HVAC. This is another one too, where you'll see the note where we thinned out a significant amount of capital on that bottom sentence for Old Greenwich, the major project, 3.8 million that we removed. And same thing with Riverside, we removed out 1.17 million.
So I'm just curious as to what the work has actually been doing, because we've spent a lot of money on HVAC over the last couple of years. And so it's unclear to me what we're doing now that we did for the other years. So I went back to the budget book, and last year we spent 293,000 at Cost Cobb. So now we're doing another 200,000. We spent 45 at CMS. Now we want to do 210. EMS, we spent 200, we want to do 200 again. The high school, I think we had in there 3.6, but to be honest, I don't know if we spent that. So I'm just, and ISD, we had 792,000. Now we're doing 163,000. So I'm not criticizing the numbers. I'm just, what are we spending it on?
HVAC. We're spending every dollar. For instance, ISD, the money that was allocated was for HVAC system for the gymnasium. The money that we're requesting this year is for distribution from the existing system in the building. So we have a brand new system in the building. There's some areas that we need to make sure the distribution of the cool air gets into certain spots. But the main money from last year is going towards the gymnasium, which is currently in design.
No, and that's fine, because it's not fully described as to how, it's all under the same category as HVAC MEP.
Mhm.
So how that relates in comparison to what we spent a lot less at some schools, we spent a lot more at others. So I'm just trying to figure out how that, what exactly we're doing with HVAC.
Okay.
Because we just spend a lot of money.
And we're going to continue to spend a lot of money. It's an expensive endeavor. And now with the new issues with indoor air quality, the window units are, going by the wayside. So we're spending a lot of money on that. Just for instance, the COSCOB, we just put in a brand new system last year, basically plug and play. The previous controls for it were based on hydraulics, pneumatics, I'm sorry. The new system is all electronic. A lot of this money is to replace certain valves that are still in the system that need to be controlled by pneumatics. We're pulling those all out. Everything is electronic and everything can be done remotely as far as controlling it. Pneumatics, we didn't have that.
This is somewhere where we're also doing some more research on, because the state just announced some grant money. Yes, so that is something that we're going to be attending the webinar on. They just announced it, and hopefully Dan's consultant that helps out with some of the HVAC actually reached out to him already last week to give him a heads up. And we said that we should have him, after we get the guidance from the state, have him review like this sheet basically and tell us what projects are going to fall into the guidance and where we can seek reimbursement, hopefully. So.
And then we also had, I know we talked about the ARP money, but wasn't there almost $7 million for Western in there? Am I wrong? And then because it was designed, what happened? Because then you also have Western here for 0. So can we get an update on the Western HVAC? That would be great. And if you don't have it, we can get it. Thanks. Thank you.
Okay, Julian Curtis, expansion renovation.
I don't know if we're going for third time charm or if we want, I'm not sure why this is in here, and I really want to have a robust conversation. I'm not poo-pooing it, saying I really want to know what we think about this and whether or not it makes sense, given you've got CMS, you've also got Old Greenwich, so we have to talk about, and then this one, granted it's at 1.5, but you've got the other one. And the question is, do we want to do this again, or do we want to take an opportunity to look at this project and figure out what else we can do? And are we
Using your mic.
Are we piecemealing it together in a sufficient way with all of the other pricing? So I think
That's
just
why
have
we're
to
here.
Throw it out on the table.
Well, I was gonna say, should we add it to an agenda down the road to have that discussion?
I think we're talking about that we have a couple, at the end of the meeting, maybe we should cull down what are the bigger discussion issues. I'm certainly happy to have the budget committee have a discussion about it. However, it feels like some of them are bigger than just the budget committee and that it should be full board discussion. Because half of us talking about it isn't really productive. It really should be all of us. So if we kind of cull it down and maybe figure out whether it's at our retreat and
Yeah, because I think this is a much bigger conversation. You basically have the 3 prongs, right, of these 3 schools. And so I think we need to talk about it more broadly. I'm not sure we could do it tonight, especially without Cody here. I think it'd be good to have him included in that conversation as well.
Yeah, and it'll be important to, I think, relate it to how we're going to relate some of these other, that we have to have that conversation with a number of these large projects and prioritize, this is significant capital spending.
I mean, you were just sort of putting everything out there is kind of
Yeah.
the impression I'm getting with this,
The way
right?
that Julian Curtis is this is what it was shown in the final town budget. So if you look at the 23 approved budget by the town, this is where the funding is. So it was deferred. The exact same numbers, it's just taken out of the fiscal year 23 budget book.
So I have a question for timing purposes. I think Christina, you had mentioned I knew we voted on this in October. So when is the October meeting that we're voting on? Because it is.
It's the monthly meeting, the second meeting in October, the 20th. So we have a retreat on the 6th. So we could always add these to it, just like when we're talking about the date, all the achievement data.
So we essentially have a month to get this all done.
So just to clarify, so we are voting on the capital budget separate from operating, and we're doing it a month earlier than traditional.
2 weeks.
Well, 2 weeks.
It's earlier than the operating, sorry.
2 months earlier. 2 months. This is 2 months.
Last
Well-
year we did- last year we had the budget.
December.
Last year we had the
Yeah,
budget
sorry.
go in December.
That's true.
First week of December.
Right, it is 2 months.
That's what I was going to say, especially since this is new for us and none of us, I think some of us, like I said, in at least the past 15 years, I've never known this to be done this far in advance. And there's obviously some bigger discussion items.
It was done as recently as like, I know I spoke with Laura Erickson and Leslie Moriarty, and it was done during their tenure.
It was, that's why
I'm happy to go back.
It's the
and take a
town
look, but-
process, Karen. We got to do it. So we can complain about
So
it. We're stuck with it.
Well, that we can talk about that at like, at the end of the meeting. To me, if we're not ready to vote on this and if it's a month and a half in advance than what we're expecting,
And I think
are we
though,
going to be ready? It's so much earlier. And some of these are bigger discussions.
We have to be ready for the town. We have no choice. We just have to keep on trucking
The
and keep going.
town doesn't have to have it until we give it to them in December to usually. Okay, that's a whole
the
nother
board
story.
is usually, it's a challenge. It's a real scramble to get the final budget book ready together for, just speaking from my other hat, when I used to put the budget together, it's a real scramble to get it in time. And there ends up kind of being like some simple mistakes too, because everyone's rushing and there's a lot of manual formatting happening like within 2 weeks on, hundreds of millions of dollars. What we may be able to do though is prioritize some of our decisions and it might be a way we can split some of this out and get them 90% of what we want and have a longer time frame to vote on the full package. And that may be a way that we could compromise with the town. So they've got 90% plugged in.
So my question then is to Christina, like when we were setting from PGC, when we were setting the calendar for the year and dates and agendas, did we know that the times had been
That's
moved
why we
up?
added this meeting.
Well, I know we added this,
When we
but
added this meeting because we knew we had to vote on capital before November 1st.
Okay, but my point is that I didn't know that. And my point is still like, we have other
I
budget
thought we
dates.
talked about it. No?
No.
We did, but we actually had this on as a board retreat early for us.
Okay.
We were
Yes.
already planning to have it early,
Okay.
thinking we were going to have more
Okay, that's
time.
right.
And
They
then the
also
town
voted.
accelerated. Yeah.
Yeah, no. We didn't have those dates when we set our meeting dates. We added this because we wanted to just get a jump on it initially for us. I didn't know that things had moved up. So my question then is secondarily, do we have to go back and look at when we're getting our budget presentations and dates because we based it on one of their older dates?
I'm not sure I understand what you mean, but
I'll go take a
the
look at our
the
agendas.
operating's on the usual timetable.
Okay.
Operating stays the same.
So we're only going to have public comments on this before we have a vote next week.
Yeah.
And at the meeting where we vote. Which is what always happens for our regular budget anyway. We only have a public comment meeting and then they vote at the meeting when we vote in the
So there'll be
December.
2 meetings of public comment.
Okay,
Meeting with public comment, so it's really a-
right. So traditionally we have a budget meeting, right, where everything's presented. And we're saying that's happening at the October business meeting, like the October retreat. The capital part, not voting. That's the tradition. That's in lieu of the budget presentation that we've had in the past.
We'll still get the budget presentation on operating.
I know that in lieu of the capital part of it.
Yeah, I mean, it's a process we're inheriting.
No, I
It's-
know.
Yeah.
I'm just clarifying. So, and then we're going to vote, and then we'll get public comment and vote at the next meeting.
But people can have public comment at our meeting next week.
Right.
There's an ability for people.
Shouldn't we, for efficiency, finish the presentation, then talk about this?
You think so?
No,
Good point, Joe.
Suggestion. Thank you.
Okay, so that one's we're gonna come back to. So the next one, we've got life safety systems. The next one is Old Greenwich expansion renovation. I'm gonna match the name on the project sheet. I think we fixed that already. Next one is this program called Other Lighting, Paving, Painting. The next one is playground replacement. This is just for your reference. This is something that we coordinate with Parks and Recreation on. We also actually, since this project sheet has been submitted, we've been reviewing open capital, current projects, and we have funding available to finish the second half of ISD. So we're going to be shifting this and removing ISD from this project sheet.
Wait, yeah, that's what I was just going to ask you about. So, because ISD did get a new playground this summer. Oh, it was only half. And then this is the remaining half?
We have the funds available to do the second half. We didn't think we would have it.
Ah, got it.
We had to hold money back because we had to build.
Right, you had to build the access, the ADA access to the
Correct.
playground.
We had to hold the money back. So
So-
we have enough funds available now. We'll continue with the replacement of the second half at ISD next summer.
So we will still need all these, the 338.
The 338 for ISD will either be removed or will
Reduced.
identify a different school.
Got it.
Pull up. That we have to.
Thanks. No, that's fine.
The
Thank you.
the next schooling too from the playgrounds are maintained by, the certified staff over at Parks and Recreation. Their recommendation for the next ones are North Street and Julian Curtis. Those were the two that they sent over for. Plumbing and electrical. This is another program where we've thinned out what would be referred to as double counting. Riverside, yep.
Just a couple of the schools were particularly large. North Miamis and Parkway. Can I just ask what's going on at those two more than the other? Everybody, yeah, obviously there's a certain amount needed, but those two were substantially more than everyone else. You can answer that separately if you want to, Dan. That's fine. Just thank you.
I'm sure there is. There's a lot. I'm fixing them as we go through too. What do you got?
Sorry, I think there's a typo. It's on the Riverside expansion project on your second sheeter. Oh, sorry. Well, it says renovate OG school.
All right, we could say Riverside expansion renovation. Yeah. What do you have? Riverside?
Yeah, you say it says Riverside expansion renovation, right?
Mhm.
So I assume this is Riverside, but then on the second sheet, it says expand renovate OG school.
You got it. That's another one I think we'll put a pin in.
Another bigger conversation for the
Okay.
end.
Roofs. So another program too that we're working on. School kitchen equipment replacement. This one's pretty standard, just routine equipment replacement in the kitchens. Small request. Okay, the next one would be security vehicles. So
Did this get moved to operating last year? There was some, like, so, because I
Last
remember that
year's-
was like a
Yeah, the
whole.
security upgrades program, which is usually like around 300 to 400,000
Mhm.
for all the camera equipment, hardware, was all moved to operating.
But then did they buy a golf cart? I remember there was a discussion at the BET about a cart, extra cart. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe one of these carts. Do we know? Okay.
Yeah, this would be the only element of a vehicle like this that would fit the definition of capital from the town.
For just informational purposes, is it possible to put together like line item totals? Like, for example, that says, okay, maintenance or new project or improvement, so we can see the numbers allocated to those specific buckets? Is that easy enough to do?
These check boxes? Yeah, because we've got the category on the side here. So we can easily sort this by
Yeah,
that as well.
that
and
would
give
just
you a
be helpful,
summary.
just like a
Yep.
bottom line total on what our annual
What's
maintenance
just
costs.
routine maintenance, what's going to be an upgrade, and what we don't have new projects. Yeah, luckily we're in Excel here and we've got Kim, she's a wizard at it. And the nice thing too is what you'll see at the bottom, the totals. Also for easy comparison is what is approved in the fiscal year 23 budget, final budget by the town for comparison and the percent difference. As we look to, look at our request prioritization and also smooth things out for capital modeling. Okie dokie. Stage renovation. This is the numbers here are mostly placeholders from last year's budget. This is a work in progress. There's a lot of stuff that, at the stages that need some more curtains, anything related, all that stuff basically. But we're putting together a program, so shortly should have some better numbers and specifics for you. Stairs, ramps, and walls. Pretty basic one.
Just Dan, while we're here, how are the ramps and stairs, since we're talking about open capital a little bit here at Havemeyer? I know, have things started?
No. They have not. That's one of the next items we'll be looking at. You're referring to the HC ramp in front of the building, right?
The fire escape.
Fire escape is under contract. It's they've already started their review. It's the same folks that did the review and design for Riverside. So we're pretty happy with that project.
I'll skip over one so that we can just finish the last project sheet. Windows and doors. This was another one where we thinned out over $500,000 in double counted capital. So going back up one in the list, we also will have a project sheet for Western Middle School. The remaining funds. The town appropriated $8 million in fiscal year 23 for the project in advance to help smooth out the request. So we have a total open capital amount around 9 million between the total prior year's budgeted money that's currently open. And the $12 million number is a good guesstimate at the moment.
That number just keeps going up, doesn't it?
Yep. So it was last year was a real total placeholder that the town put in at 8 million. So it's a $4 million difference than what the wild card was as a placeholder last year for impact, for budget impact.
And I know we'll talk about that at the business meeting because I would love an update on that.
What's the 6 million Cardinal Field improvement?
So we still have a number of projects to talk about. I'll be really quick. So we don't have anything in the dark blue. We don't have a fiscal year 24 appropriation request for, but on our capital plan, these are projects that are either shown in the current book or things that we should talk about because they need to be included in the model. These are, if there's also other projects that the board wants to add in out years, we should add, that doesn't have a fiscal year 24 request, we should start adding them, because you don't want the BET and RTM don't like to see new projects unless they're emergencies. So if we do have them in the out years, basically what I'm saying, if there's other things we want to show that we're thinking about, we can put them on the out years, but not have a fiscal year 24 request. We build them, we put them in the dark blue. That's a good way to put it. Put them in the dark blue. So administration building, you can see, is pushed way out. That's this building. That would be a conversation piece for looking at significant capital investment. Cardinal Field improvement is phase 2 of the project. This is shown in the current approved budget. This is one that we also wanted to have as a discussion point, $6 million. Do we want to submit an appropriation request for phase 2 of the project? This is not something obviously the board has to answer right now. This is the question we're asking of the board. Yes. Are there guiding questions that you want to direct to us at the, we can also split this project, we can push it, but the main piece of this question would be to, find out the direction we want to go in.
Okay, so if I look at sort of the things we went through, the big ticket items that we still have to talk about maybe at another time, or Central Middle School, Old Greenwich, Julian Curtis, Riverside, and cell service, because that was something where we seem to have split it and we might have wanted to consider it together.
And I guess the question is, did we want to include, I mean, I kind of lost track in the conversation. Did you want the HAMAV HVAC? Or I guess that's kind of not really.
That's a big ticket item that has to be discussed.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, that's
so
what
add
we
that
would
to
be
the
looking
list.
for significant input on. And there's also, the ones that we have highlighted in blue down here are also, I think, there's no fiscal year 24 request, but like these big blue squares, these are significant conversation pieces that basically when the town is asking us to prioritize capital, they're looking at the sum, they're going to say, oh, GPS is looking for $500 million in capital funding in our model for budgeting for debt service. What is not shown basically here for you, the numbers that are not highlighted are where they are in the approved budget. The highlighted squares are some rough suggestions that we would advise moving them to. But these are basically what we will need from the board is really, I think, that with this view, which is the town budget book view, would be to look, how do we want to prioritize spending so that we have a logical approach when we go in, and that will help us make our fiscal year 24 request and actually get funding for fiscal year 24 when we can also defend our out year requests for other schools. So that's what we'll be looking for from guidance on the board on where we want to say we're going to put these.
So first of all, just one more time, this was fantastic work because you're 10 days into this job, and
Got a good team here.
We will forgive you your typos. 3 days in, you're all good.
And you have a great team, and Dan, he's pretty good. So
Dan's not bad, yeah.
and so well, I'll say that offline. So thank you, and I think this is a really great way to look at it. And I know this is a process that we could all debate, but it has been something that's been done in the past, and it is what it is. And I think it'll be great, and we'll get online and figure it out. And this is really helpful. So where do we go from here? We can continue to obviously talk tonight, but I am aware of the fact that we're missing one of our budget committee members, and I think he's a pretty analytical guy. So I'd love for him to be a part of this conversation too. And I think we have some things that we really need to dig into and have some follow-up questions, and you probably have to update a few things that we discussed here tonight. So I'll turn to you guys, but Christina, as chair of budget committee, do you have any thoughts on how you want to add? And
well, I guess the question, like to the point I was making earlier, I'm happy to have a budget committee meeting. But I think some of these bigger discussions are way beyond the budget committee. So, and then we can't invite other board members to a budget committee meeting because then it's a full board meeting. So I think the budget committee could be a preliminary discussion if we wanted to, if you want us to do any digging in, or as I said, put it on the agenda for that October 6th meeting for the full board when we're kind of in this format. And I think, you know, we're gonna be rolling our sleeves up and talking about achievement day. Yeah, just to roll up your sleeves and do some thinking night. So
Maybe we move it
it's kind of,
earlier.
I'm happy to go with what the group believes is the right approach.
Yeah, honestly, I was gonna say, maybe we consider moving it earlier so we can like have some strength. Anyway, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say to that end, so for October 6th for that retreat, because we were planning to do curriculum and achievement and so forth. We don't have strategic plan yet on here, but we can certainly add it. But we have board professional development. If we have to move that, we could and add this in because this is important. But I will say either way, we still have to go in and revise our agenda plan because it very specifically talks about here Thursday, December 1st budget proposed here. You know, that's the first of here. It says it's proposed operating capital budgets being presented. Public hearing and Q&A is December 1st. So if there's timing that's been changed now by the town, we now have to go back in and redo this agenda plan.
Well,
And
can we
that means
vote on that? I
adjusting
think
a
we can
couple of
vote on
other
that
things.
next Thursday, right? A revised agenda plan.
But my point is are there other, like, we need to take a deep look at this and just to see if there's other things that need to then be moved around. You don't want to top load one meeting with 850 items. And so my point is, if we have to move that budget meeting from December 1st, because that says capital and operating, we just have to figure it out.
Right,
That's
it'll
all.
be an operating. I'm focused more on what we have to do in the next like 5 weeks.
Yeah.
Right, but that's the point is we have to be able to figure out when we can, as a board, have a discussion and like, it's not just, we have other things on our agendas that we need to be able to focus on too. So if we're still
Christine,
adding this.
I'm sorry. You had seemed not convinced that we have to have a budget committee.
No, I
meeting.
can go
I
with
think
the,
spitballing in the budget committee meeting.
I'm
and some
fine with,
stuff
yeah,
is
I'm
fine.
totally fine with it, but I just think the people who aren't on the budget committee, who are going to feel not FOMO left out, but just that they're not participating because they can't participate because we're 4 of us and one person turns it into a full board meeting. It becomes a full meeting of the board if any non-budget committee member comes and speaks at a budget committee meeting. So that was more you can sit and listen.
I think framing.
No, I'm
framing's
fine.
important. I think.
Yeah,
important to
no,
frame
I'm
some
totally
stuff
fine
out
with it.
and
So.
and be flexible to change it all, but at least. put
Yeah,
the
no,
structures
I'm
together.
totally good with it, but it was just whether people felt excluded. Yeah,
You're
or
right.
or their viewpoints excluded.
I
So
think it's important committee work, and then I think you'll inform us, and we can all attend.
We will be having one next week, people, so just get ready.
Because that would be great, because if you could do something in the next 2 weeks, and then we meet on October 6th, that, hopefully that could be like almost.
I'm actually
almost
out
there.
of town. I'm out of town the week of the 26th. So if we do it by Zoom, it'd be fine, but yeah, so otherwise in person next week.
So I don't have the agenda in front of me, but it seems to me that October 6th is a pretty hefty meeting, and I'm not sure we want to put all of this together. And so I know how much we like to get together on a regular basis here because we're working on, weekly, but I know, but just for the sake of sanity purposes, so we kind of break it up, and I would be happier probably with 2 shorters than 2 shorter meetings and 1 really long meeting, because I know that at certain points, given the hour that I wake up in the morning, I'm worthless. So I'm just going to vote no on everything.
Yeah, nobody wants that.
Exactly. The only problem is that if we stick to our Thursday thing, September 29th, I know it's open house at the high school, which I don't want to miss.
Yeah, we can't.
Since when have we only stuck to Thursdays with
That's
all
what I was
those
just gonna
central
say.
meetings?
Yeah,
That's my point on looking at our agenda plan.
That's a good point. So I'm sorry, so first of all, as a budget, as someone not on the budget committee meeting, I do not feel left out. Please go ahead and talk all you want. So I did one clarification here. So in 23-24, the bottom column here, so it's fiscal year 23 BET RTM final budget, you have listed as $156 million. That's the total capital budget for the town, not the Board of Ed.
That's the Board of Ed.
I thought so what was 30 for capital or for everything?
No, that's what's shown in the approved fiscal year 23 budget and the 15-year plan for fiscal year 24.
Okay, but.
So these numbers are being, last year, yes, our fiscal year 23 request was 38 million.
Right.
What that is saying is that in the approved budget, I took the 15-year plan, and these are the totals that were projected in the approved budget from fiscal year 23 for each of those fiscal years.
Okay, because I want to make clear, because I do worry, I understand process and everything, but I want to make sure that, this is a public document and it's going to go out to community, and everybody who has a vested interest in one of these lines, we're going to hear from, which is understandable. And I want to make sure we understand here that the actual capital budget last year was 38 for the board was 38 million. So it wasn't so it's not that we have a decrease of 16%. It's actually an increase of, if we fund everything on this list, we're increasing the capital budget 400% and change.
No, you're looking at the wrong thing. So basically, when the town approves the budget, right, they approve just the 1 year, but they have like the 15 years in there.
But we approved 38 million last year.
Yeah, and that's the 22, 23. That's not in here. That's a
It's
part of the
not in there
prior
because I
3
took it
years.
off, but there would be another column for 23 and it would show 38 million.
Yeah, but we have not approved 156 million just
No,
because
you
it's in
did
the
not.
strategic
But
plan.
the town did.
The town did. The town budgets, did I bring my budget book? So here's the town approved capital budget. And this is the fiscal year 23 capital budget. So I'm pulling these numbers from, if I go to the capital schedule, I'm going to go to the Board of Education. So each year, the town approves an equivalent of this document. So what the town showed in this document for fiscal year, and this is what OFS uses, this is how everyone kind of transitions projects. And projects are, in theory, other than new emergencies that come up, are supposed to kind of move their way down the line. So the town was showing us for fiscal year 24 in this book, in fiscal year 24, to have a request of 156 million.
By the town, do we mean the BET?
We mean the budget, our budget request gets proposed by us and we hand off, each entity hands it off to the first selectman.
Okay.
The first selectman hands it for capital. The first selectman then hands it off to the BET. This then goes through, there's a version, it's called the selectman's budget. Then the selectman's
Right.
budget becomes the recommended budget. That's the budget committee. And then it's the proposed budget. That's the full BET. And then the final budget is the RTM.
Right.
So these numbers are from the final budget.
Yeah, but I think what you're trying to say, and if I'm getting it wrong, please correct me, is we're not saying, we didn't put forward last year and was officially approved that we were going to spend, $156 million in capital, and the BET and the RTM said, bless that.
But they just projected it. It's projected. They believe it's the projection
They
of what we're
believe-
going to ask for, the 156.
Right, but they haven't said,
They haven't approved it.
They
right.
haven't
But
approved
These are
it,
just the
right.
project, the
No, this is
150
their projection.
their projection. And what you're saying
Yes.
is that what you're proposed, what the 130 is we're projecting a request under what they projected.
Yes, and the goal here is, there's a lot of confusion, I think, without having this tool be basically used by the board, this specific tool, this 15-year plan, because things get lost in translation. And I think we've all heard it, the BET has expressed concern about things like double counting. What's the definition of other major projects? Is Old Greenwich, 800, like we just said, $875,000 was taken out of the model that was approved by them last year. And I think what we want to try to do is work with the BET and start using a document that's like this, because there is uncertainty in some of these numbers from the town, and rightfully so, because some things are double counted, because you don't want to take out a major project, but you may also be including maintenance on that same major project. But if we're all using the same template, that will become a little bit easier. The town uses a 15-year plan. This is their template. This is their terminology. The town only appropriates 1 year at a time for capital. So you are right.
right, because, so I'm looking at this, and like the for example, the BET obviously hasn't approved, and then if we come to them with a number of $130 million, we're not going to get $130 million. And
No,
No.
we're not.
But
I mean,
I'm-
that's definitely not
okay.
happening. Right.
So, but the point that the point I'm trying to make is I think it is very misleading to come in and say, oh, well, we're 16.7% under what we were, what the BET and the RTM realized we were projecting. Because then the tagline in the headlines is going to be, oh, the BOE came under 16.7%, and yet the BET and the RTM are not approving it. So now they are anti-education. That's not true.
Well, that wouldn't be my talking point. I think the talking point, why it's important to show what's compared is because for two reasons. What we're showing is that we are putting a lot of effort to take the town's process seriously. We're putting a lot of effort in reducing double counting in the model so that things like debt service, things like projections, we can all be more confident in the numbers. If I was someone looking at this, we're trying as a team here, and I've only been here for 10 days and we've only been working together for a short period of time, but as a team, as a board, you're saying, we're going to start looking at capital in this view that the town's asked us to look at it in, and these things will start hopefully normalizing a little bit more. When I go, like we go before the BET, what we're doing, they've asked us to do two things. Reduce double counting, their definition of double counting, which from a financial model is double counting. And the second piece is to focus on open capital. A lot of the capital requests here, which is why I will break it capital up by major projects, some of these real major projects, Dan has put a lot of effort into also prioritizing what we're going to be spending and also deferring routine maintenance without impacting some service levels so that we can focus on open capital. So when we're comparing it to what we were showing, what we're showing them is what we're showing everybody is saying that we're going through, we're thinning out capital, we're trying to build a real financial model here that in theory ends up becoming outside. We have a big blip here with a lot of projects that are coming up at once here, but ideally this starts to get smoothed out and we're prioritizing capital. That's kind of where that comparison is. And we've removed a lot of double counting.
Yeah.
But I think, Michael, what you're saying is that this is becoming a public document. All eyes will see $140 million for a projected number, which is not actually the number. And I think what you're saying, if I am correct, is that that people are going to see this, the uninformed are going to look at this and say, wow, this is kind of kooky. So
well, it's
is that
there.
what you're saying?
It's there. So this is
It's already public.
This is on the town website. Why I included this is for something I think that is really important for the board to say. I think Julian Curtis would be the perfect example of why we're doing something this way. Julian Curtis is in this book. This is on the website. This is kind of the Bible for anyone that does town finance. And also, if you're a parent, paying attention to capital. If I go on greenwichct.gov right now and I click on budget documents and schedules, I'm going to click on capital. This is there. And I'm going to see that Julian Curtis is shown in this book where it's shown right here in this document before you. I left the key pieces there so that this board can be prepared to have those conversations. It's why it's so important to use a model like this, because you want to be speaking the same language. This is on the website. 156 million is in this model. So if I'm a parent, I'm seeing, that's why all these other key projects are still down here for you to talk about, even though they're way the heck out in fiscal year 30. It's already on the website and this is what's shown each year. This is part of the conversation.
So can I make a tiny little recommendation? Some of us they've been involved in budgeting in town for a very long time. Some of us are new to the board and new to town budgeting. And some of us just aren't, budget focused per se in the same manner that
You don't
others
love
are.
this stuff right here?
Some of us like to buy shoes in every color. So I'm just saying, so this document, the CIP sheet's very clear. This document, I know I just got tonight and I'm looking at it, can be confusing. If, you know, in the past, we've asked, you know, when we put out certain documents that have these fun little three letter, you know, like short words that we use, we ask for a little, what am I looking, what's the word I'm looking for? Like, you know, a definition sheet. You know, BOE stands for Board of Education.
Mhm.
You know, CIP stands for Capital Improvement Plan, whatever it might be. Right, glossary, maybe that's the word I'm looking for. If there, is there a way to put something here just with a little disclaimer or definition so that people, when they look at this, don't, that maybe missed our meeting tonight, or, but they, so they just see this document, and this document is what's floating around because it's a public document. They understand what they're looking at, because I know I just got it and I wasn't clear what I was looking at specifically until you gave us that full rundown. So I was thinking that might be rather helpful.
Yeah, I think
You don't have to give a
that's-
20-page document explaining it, but just like a little blurb.
Yeah, I should have put a.
And a
huge
giant
draft on
giant
this.
draft. No, seriously, giant draft
Definitely
like
needs
it's
to
on
be
the
Yes.
CIP sheet should be
Yes,
on this.
It
Yeah.
should be, because
But-
this is it. Most other, I mean, the one problem with trying to fit into the town process is that we're not the town department. So this doesn't, this is what's public for everybody, but this is not public until the budget for the first selectman is presented, the new version of it, the updated version. The board, because we're the Board of Ed, our process is in the open for the whole entire thing. Normally, as you're smoothing things out, moving, I mean, there's so many conversation points that every department gets to have internally, and every other board, other than this board, basically have internally. So their version doesn't have 17 versions. You know, that you really, people, it's going to be something we should talk about, because people can really get confused as they go on board.
I think
documents and
a
versions,
big
there's
giant
versions.
draft, and I think put a date.
Yeah.
Yeah, draft.
And
A
it's
date
like-
draft as of
Yep.
blank,
And
and I
that-
think that'll be really helpful,
Work, like
Blaze.
warning, like work in progress, draft one.
Version one,
But
exactly.
even if you're saying this also, this links back to documents that are on the town website, make sure you show that link so that, because again, these are just numbers on a spreadsheet. That document has a lot more detailed information, and it's not generated by us. It was generated already by the town. So that way the town should know.
Well, you could probably, yeah, you could note that. Please see
Yeah.
greenwichct.gov or whatever
just,
for.
You know, or
Then
link
can we
it.
go
or
back to
something.
process?
I think that the process, I mean, I think we're, you know, I think we should table it. I think we should do
Yeah,
this.
people need to go, so I'll just show everyone exactly like. when
I
I'm
love the
going-
robot mower,
Yeah.
but
We've got the robot mowers in front of town hall right now. So just so everyone knows, kind of the Bible for budget people would be, you're going to the homepage, you go to government, budget documents and schedules. Every year, this is kind of where everything town budget lives. And as the process goes, all the different versions of the budget are going on this document. Our presentation, the first selectman's presentation, the BET documents, the schedules, they all kind of live here. And then when it's done, the final budget gets posted here, the final of each plan. So when I'm talking about the final capital budget, that's this version. Someone's going to click on this and, you know, basically you're seeing this 15-year plan that I'm talking about. I can pull up all my numbers, and project definitions and names are being pulled from this document.
So that's what I'm suggesting. If there's a little disclaimer
Yep.
at the bottom to say that this is where this information came from and link back. Again, most people have never looked through that full budget document. That's like that. We get the joyous doorstop delivered at our houses. every day. And to be fair, again, a lot of these documents aren't from the Board of Ed aren't posted until we've had our our presentation by the superintendent, and then it's given to this first selectman and then presented to the BET. So this is really early for us. And so for people
Really?
to be able to link back, I think it's really important.
Yeah, that's a really good point.
You know what, and also just in terms of public communication, maybe Tony, I think in your Friday note, make people aware that we're discussing our capital budget. You know, I don't know, you can link to I just think if we're going to be very transparent and get input from the community, I think, people read your Friday note. So I think that would be a good thing to include this
Yeah,
week.
because we've probably, even since this version today, probably thinned out another $200,000, $300,000. While Dan was just sitting here, we just thinned out another 190,000, in out years counting. So This is a real working document for those listening.
All right, so I think it's there's probably gonna be a budget committee, then we're going to spend a lot of time on this on October 6th. And we'll see if we can fit anything else in beforehand, or if we can move that meeting perhaps a little earlier. Okay, with pizza, well, okay.
Yes, I beg of you just to link back to the town documents because people are saying that I'm getting messages from people saying that they're listening and they're looking on the town website and they can't find it to link back. So I just beg of you to share a link.
Okay. Joe, Laura? Can I get a second? All in favor? That passes 7-0. Thank you so much. Blaze, welcome again. Dan, Kimberly, thank you.